Hey everybody, and welcome to Chapter 4, Lesson 1 on the causes of the Spanish-American War. Chapter 4 is all about global involvement and the United States starting to take an interest in what's going on around the whole planet. So first, let's take the notes down, copy those down. Let's talk about this. So this begins about 1898. Well, it begins a few decades before that, but we've been talking about the big trends in America being people moving from rural to urban areas, so people moving to the cities. The other big trend is industrialization, so people have more access to consumer goods. That's what's starting to drive the economy, is buying consumer goods. Around the whole planet, the other trend is the European countries, they've been colonizing. We learned that from last year in 6th grade, that England and France and Spain and Portugal, they're taking over parts of the planet, South America, Africa, Asia. They're colonizing, and they're getting resources from these places. Like they control large areas of Africa, and they can mine and take the resources they need for industrialization. The United States can't really do that because we're founded on this idea of liberty and freedom, and we fought for our independence, and so we're kind of torn. We like the idea of industrialization. We are one of the wealthiest countries on the planet, but we have this desire to not colonize, to not take someone else's freedom. But Europe and France and Spain, they don't have any problem with that. So they've been getting this advantage in business where they take over other countries. So the trends are, people are industrializing and making money. The trend is European powers are colonizing and taking over other areas of the world. But the other trend is decolonization, which means that other countries or other places are following our model of independence, and they're fighting for their independence. So Cuba is the perfect place to kind of see that, because Cuba is a source of one of America's biggest addictions, sugar. And around 1890, we have a lot of investment in sugar being grown in Cuba. Cuba, if you know anything about Cubans, they speak Spanish there, and they were controlled by Spain. But we had businesses based in Cuba, so we make money off of Cuba. At the same time, the Cuban people, they're facing the same things that we're facing in America with low wages, long hours, unsafe working conditions. The Spanish are doing that, only they're doing it much worse because they completely control Cuba. So America is kind of torn that we want the Cuban people to be free and independent. At the same time, though, we make a lot of money off of the Cuban island, Cuba, based on sugar. So those two things kind of come in conflict, but they end up leading down the road to this war with Spain. Cuba ends up being the place where things kind of come to a head and things build up and reach a boiling point, where rebels are there fighting for independence from Spain. Spain is cracking down on them. They don't want to lose more of their empire, but as different places in South America are being independent and fighting revolutions following our model, Spain is losing its empire, and they try to hold on to Cuba. And so in America, we're torn about, we want to support the rebels, and that's the R in bury. The mnemonic here is B-U-R-Y, as in we're going to bury Spain, dig a hole, put them in it, bury Spain. But the R is where I want to start, because that's the rebels. That is the best reason for us to be involved, if there is a reason to be involved, because it involves people's liberty, their freedom, and we want to support that. But then the B, the business interest, that's the part that says, whoa, slow down. Let's not get too hasty here, and maybe we can work this thing out, because that at least gives us kind of a predictable, stable place for business. Big change makes businesses nervous. They like stability. They like to know what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day and the next month from now. They like stability and predictability. So this revolution in Cuba upsets the sugar industry, which is a big part of America. So the U.S. government, to protect its business interests, They send a boat down to Cuba just to chill things out and say, everyone just calm down, we're watching. Spain, could you please control things and try to stop, or at least do something to stop the revolution, stop the rebels, or maybe compromise and find a peace, or just give up and pack up and go away. But this war between the rebels and the Spanish in Cuba is just bad for business. So we send this boat down there called the Uss Maine. On February 15th, 1898, the USS Maine explodes. 250 U.S. sailors die out of about 350 who were on board. The Spanish freak out, and they instantly send boats out to Havana Harbor in Cuba to rescue as many sailors as they can. But in the United States, they get word of this, and all around the country, people are just angry because a U.S. boat has been exploded, and the country demands to know why. The U.S. government, or specifically the president, William McKinley, is trying to calm things down. Most businesses don't want to go to war because it makes them very nervous, but a lot of the American people are wanting to help the rebels. They're angry about the boat blowing up. They want to find out what happened. Now, spoiler alert, what happens is there's the place where they keep their weapons in the boat was stored next to its fuel, coal, and that created an explosion that happened inside the boat. So the Spanish had nothing to do with it. The boat blew itself up. But people in America started to suspect or think that the Spanish did this. The Spanish blew up the boat. And it started to create more anger that would prompt people to want war with Spain. That was made worse or greater by what's called yellow journalism. Yellow journalism is what we would call today clickbait. It's the first clickbait. Clickbait is where you tell something that's not quite true or not true at all in order to get somebody's money. Yellow journalism is when newspapers publish things that aren't true, that are misleading stories that stretch the truth in order to get you to buy papers. Now, when the USS Maine explodes in 1898, two of the biggest captains of the newspaper industry, William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, they own some newspapers in New York City. They start to print articles about how the Spanish are responsible for this, and the Spanish, they're demanding a war with Spain. And people who are reading this are starting to believe the Spanish are responsible. They're believing exaggerated stories about Spanish atrocities, which have some truth to them, but are also exaggerated to sell papers, like clickbait. So this starts in February. By April, Congress declares war, and this war lasts for about 4 months. It's short, it's fast, and we see the rise of this figure called Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt rises to power as he was originally the naval secretary. He retires from that job to go fight in Cuba. There are hundreds of thousands of people in America who enlist because of the USS Maine explosion under the rallying cry of "Remember the Maine." Come on! Remember the Maine! And they enlist to go fight in the war, and we're able to defeat the Spanish in 4 months. And we'll get into that with the next lesson, but the 4 things that prompt this war: business interests, sugar, the explosion of the USS Maine, the rebels in Cuba that Americans have a natural sympathy for. They remind us of us. And then all of this is made worse by yellow journalism, exaggerating stories and telling lies in order to sell papers. And that leads to the Spanish-American War.